What's up, everybody? Axe Wizard here. Feeling like I want to do a little bit of a tutorial today. This channel is about beards, games, guitars, and I've got a beard, I play guitar, I play games, but what if you want to make your own games? Well, I'm going to get you started on that path today. One of the more popular options is Game Maker Studio. It's been around for a while. I've been using it for years. For me, it's the thing I click with, and even though I've learned a bunch of languages and stuff since then, my real job is a programmer. I still gravitate towards Game Maker because I can get rapid prototypes working very quickly. And it's also a good intro if you've never done programming before, you just want to get started with game development. This would give you a nice intro to that. So let's hop into it. So here I'm at the Game Maker start screen here. After I log in, I'm going to go to a new blank project, and I'm going to choose GML, which stands for Game Maker Language. Now, Game Maker does have this thing called D&D, which is drag and drop, which I did at the start, and I wish I hadn't because it bogged me down in the long run. I just want to go to using code, and we'll jump into that shortly. For this, I'm going to name this YouTube game, because I don't even have a script or a plan for this. I don't know what I want to make really, but I just want to share some knowledge I have. So this is the main screen for Game Maker Studio. Now, I'm using Game Maker Studio 2, which is like the most recent version, I think. If you're using GMS Studio 1, there will be a lot of similarities. I'll try to point out differences in case you're using that. And even if you're using the old Game Maker non-studio, the old Game Maker 7 or 8 or older, a lot of this stuff will still apply. So on the right over here, we have a bunch of different folders. I'm going to minimize this quick access. A whole bunch of this stuff that you can do, but just to get started with games, there's only 3 things I really use a lot. Those 3 things are sprites. Now, Game Maker Studio 2 does a lot of 2D, like 2-dimensional, you can do pixel games and stuff with it. That's what I like to use it for. Sprites are basically your animations. It's what you visually see. The next thing that we have is objects, which is basically where your code lives and where you determine what those sprites and stuff do. And then the next thing is rooms, which I like to think of as like levels. Those 3 things, sprites, objects, and rooms, are the 3 things you really need to be worried about. You can make some really cool games with using only those 3 things. So let's just go make a sprite. So I'm going to just create a new sprite. So this brings me to this fancy window here. Game Maker Studio 2, well, I think every game maker has a built-in sprite editor, like a little built-in image editor that you can use. Since it's there, I just learned to use it. It's kind of nice, but you can use whatever editor you like. If you are already an artist and you're using something else like, GIMP, Krita, Photoshop, online stuff like Sumo Paint, or, whatever you want to use, you can import those images in here. Just a note about limitations. Game Maker doesn't work too well with SVGs, so it doesn't work well with vector style images, but like JPEGs and PNGs, you can do that all day. So when I name it, I'm going to prefix it with SPR. I don't know if that's necessary anymore, but I do know that for older versions of Game Maker, that is necessary because you're naming a resource. This is going to be a sprite. So if I were to just name this like sprite player, or just player, but I also have an object named player and I have something else named player, that would be a naming conflict. So I prefix it with SPR for sprite. That's something that may not be necessary anymore. I don't know. You can prefix it with whatever you like as long as you make the name unique. I do know that a lot of the Game Maker documentation seems to prefer this sort of syntax or guidelines rather. So I'm going to name this I don't know, SPR player. I'm just going to start with player. I still don't even know what game I want to make. I kind of want to make like a top-down like wizard game where I can cast spells. So I think I'm just going to make a wizard. So this is the image editor. You know, you've got your basic color palette here. You've got a few tools you can use. If you've ever used like MS Paint, it's very similar to that. So it's pretty easy to use. It does let you do layers, which is nice. So you can make some pretty complex stuff. You can resize it how you want. The default is going to be a 64 by 64 canvas. So I'm just going to stick with that. And I think I'm going to make a super basic like wizard dude. You can also throw on a grid too if you want, and you can resize the grid however you like. So it's pretty user friendly, I think. So I'm just going to go here to here. I'm going to make a circle, and then I'm going to go from like here to there. That's still too small or too big. I'm going to go here. Now, one thing when you're making your sprites, depending on how you're making them, so since I'm making a top down, the camera's like pointing straight down, I'm going to be able to rotate my sprite, and that will be like where my character's facing. So one tip that you can do is that always make sure your character is facing to the right, because how direction works in, I'm pointing to the right on mine, but on camera it probably looks to the left. So I'll put a little graphic on the screen. But GameMaker, this is how it determines direction. So it's like, it's basically 0 to 360 or 359 technically. But 0 is to the right, 90 is up, 180 is to the left, 270 is down, and then 360 is back to the right. So if you always draw your sprite to the right, that's already zeroed. So if you want to change your image angle on the fly with code later on, it'll already be synced up. So just a little tip to save you some time there. I notice this circle's a little off, so I'm going to drag this up just a little bit. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase this part of it, and I'm just going to do a little like a pointy like wizard hat type of thing. That looks good to me. So we've got our fancy wizard hat. I'm going to draw 2 circles for hands because this is obviously a AAA game. I mean, this is tough stuff here, man. Boom. And then I'll do one over here too. That seems to work. And then what I'll do is I will draw a cool staff, because every wizard should have a staff or a wand if that's your type of dealio, but I'm more of a staff kind of guy myself. So what kind of staff should he have? Should it just be like another ball? Yeah, we'll just do like another ball for now. I'm gonna draw this off over here so I can make sure that whatever orb I draw is symmetrical. And then what I can do is I can just drag it over here where I want it and make sure it looks good. And this looks a bit off. What if we just did like a really basic orb? Okay. Draw this over here. Look at that. Perfect. And then I'll draw like the back end of the staff here. And we'll just make that a point or whatever. Okay. So now to add some color to this, I'm just going to do, this is tough for me because I'm slightly colorblind. So I'm just going to pick like a nice blue. And then I'm going to do like a peach color or something for the, I don't even know what, I think that's skin color. I don't know. You know, and then I'm going to try to do a brown. This might be a red or something. I'm not sure. That might be like an orange. It looks brown to me, but you know, you can laugh at me all you want. This is fun. And I'll do like a nice deep saturated blue for the orb. So there we go. So there's my wizard. If I wanted to get fancy, I could try to add like some shading and stuff to it. You know, whatever your artist, oh, messed that up. Whatever your artistic desires want to do, you can do it. So I do a little bit of, I don't think that's the right color. I'm just going to stop. I should not be shading because I'm colorblind. So there we go. We got our little basic wizard dude. There we go. If you hold control and use your scroll wheel, you can scroll in and out. So you can see, and you can also press the equals button up here to reset zoom, so you can see how it's going to look. And if I turn this off, you can see I've got like a little wizard sprite. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty good. Cool. So there we go. I have a player. So if I close this, you can see I've got my sprite here. Now, once you make your sprite, you can specify the origin. Now, the default origin is always going to be top left. So whenever GameMaker does XY coordinates, your x-axis, your left and right, is your horizontal axis, right? So that's always going to be at the left. That's where that's going to start. Your y-axis, which is your vertical, up and down, that starts at the very top. So it's, you know, just think of like if you're writing a piece of paper, like you start at the top left, or if you're reading a book, you start at the top left. That's the same way that kind of goes. So what I'm going to do is for the origin, if you go up here to the top right, there's a few presets. I can just pick middle center, and it should center it for me. It doesn't show the preview on my screen, but oh, it does. It's just I'm colorblind. I can't see the little reticle there. Okay, but that's centered, so we're good to go there. So cool. I've got my player sprite. Okay, cool. Now let's just make another sprite for like a fireball, right? We're gonna do another sprite. I'm gonna do SPR fireball. So what kind of mage can't cast a fireball? So for this, I'm gonna resize this. I'm just gonna go 32 by 32. I think I should have picked a resized canvas, but since it's a fresh thing, it doesn't matter. So if I go here, you can see now that we have a pretty small canvas to work with. But what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make a little fireball. And since I want to be able to rotate this fireball, I'm gonna make it facing to the right. So I'm gonna put this like right up here. And then what I'll do is I'll get rid of like the back half of this. And then I'll try to like freehand draw some flames or whatever. I don't know. I'm not very artistic, so this might look pretty bad, but we'll make it work. You pixel artists out there are probably just really cringing at this, but hey, it's my fireball. I can do what I want. And we'll do one more little flamey dealio. Okay, so I got a basic fireball here. You know, nothing really too fancy. It doesn't look that great, but I don't care. So what we'll do is we'll just do a little accent here to make it look like it's some sort of ball that's being thrown. And then we can basically dye this bad boy yellow just for fun. Boom. Oh, there we go. So we'll fill this with yellow. And then if I wanted to be fancy, I could do like some oranges and stuff in there too. If I could see orange, that would be fantastic. That's green. Oh my god, I can't see. Is this a good color? No, that doesn't go at all. How about this? I think that kind of goes. If I want, I can add like some orange accents and stuff to make it all fireball-y. That seems like it could be cool. I don't know. But anyway, there's a fireball, right? The point is, we just made a sprite, which is basically an image. Now, the cool thing with sprites is that you can do multiple frames. So if you look up at the top left here, you can see I got a little plus icon. So I can actually add another frame, and I can make this animated. So this is how you do basic animation. So if I want, I could copy this. I could paste this, and I could, yes, I could like sort of do another frame animation here. So say if I wanted to take this, and what if I want to flip this? What if I want to cut that? And then, so if I flip it, I think this should look a little different. So there we go. So I've got a super basic animation, right? So now if I go down here, I can play the animation. Now it's going super, super fast, right? I can slow down the frames here. So there you go. I've got like a little basic animated fireball. It's nothing really special. It doesn't look that great, but it's something. So you can, I've spent hours just making animations and stuff in here of like characters walking and like attacking, dying, like idle poses, all sorts of stuff. Like whatever your imagination can do, you can do. Also, if you have like existing images you want to import in, you can do that as well. You could make a new sprite, and then you could just import the images as frames into that sprite, and you can set the animation how you want. There's also other ways to do animation, but that's a bit out of the scope of just this beginner look. So I'm not going to get into that right now. But there we go. I've got a fireball. I'm pretty happy with that. So now we just covered sprites. So we've got a sprite that works. We've got two sprites. We got our player and we got a fireball. Now let's make an object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an object. I think you can also hit like Alt-O to make an object. That might be a hotkey. Now for the object here, I'm going to prefix it with obj underscore. I'm just going to name this obj player. And I can set his sprite, his initial default sprite right here. So I can just go right into sprites and set it to player. I double clicked really fast on accident and selected the right sprite. So that works. Now there's a bunch of cool stuff that an object does. Now an object, how do I describe an object? For me, it's basically the thing that, how I look at an object is it's where all the code goes. So for example, I can create one object, object player, and I can create several instances of that object to do and put them on the screen at once. So say for example, like if I made this mage a necromancer and I wanted to raise a bunch of skeletons, I could make a bunch of skeleton objects, and every time that I would raise a skeleton, I would just create another instance of that object. So let's go into the events, because this is where you add interactiveness to your game. This is where you make it a game, not just a slideshow or a picture thingy, right? This is where you make it a game. This is where you add controls, how it interacts with other objects. This is where you tell the computer what to do. So if we go into the events, we have a bunch of different events. The only two things I really want you to be concerned about right now are create and then the step event. So what the create event does is that you can type code in here, and as soon as this object is created, it will run this little code block. Now, before we jump into code, I want to put you in the right mindset, right? Everyone thinks that computers are super smart. They're not. They're exceedingly dumb. They only do exactly what you tell them to do. And that's where programming or coding comes in. You have to write out the instructions of what you want your object to do. And sometimes that's pretty hard to conceptualize, and especially because you're learning a programming language, which GML is a programming language. That's how you talk to the computer to make it do stuff. So for example, if I want my player to have health, for example, I'm going to make something called a variable. Now I can just type in, I'm going to do life. I'm going to say life equals 100. There we go. Wait for it. So I just typed in life equals 100. So life is just a variable, or a variable is just something that you can set to use however you want. So let me explain how I'm going to use this. I'm going to also have a variable called life max, and I'm going to set it to life. So if you've ever been in school and you remember algebra class, I hated algebra. I didn't understand the use of it. You know, x plus 2 equals 5. What's the value of x? Well, obviously it's 3 because I can do math. Why do I have to know this? Why are they putting letters in it? The reason why they're doing that is because x was a variable, right? That value can change. So for example, our life can change. It's not always going to be 100. If we get hit by a monster, we want our life to go down, right? And if our life goes like below 0, we want to die. So we're going to have to program that. We're going to have to tell the computer that. Now this is where language comes in. So, and I also want to be able to display a health bar. So I'm going to keep track of how much life we have, but also what's our maximum life. So I can do a basic percentage calculation, which is just the current value divided by the maximum times 100. That is your percentage of life. So this is our create event. So I like to use create event for defining variables. Now, one thing I just did there is I just put those double slashes there. This is making a comment. This is something that's not compiled. It's ignored by the computer. It's only for you. Comments are very important. You want to comment what you're thinking at the time, because when you come back to this code, you know, months later, you're not going to know what you were thinking. And if you're ever going to work with other developers, they're not going to know what you're thinking. So you want to document sort of what you're doing as you go. It's really going to help you later. And if you decide to pursue a career in like software development or coding or programming or whatever, this is a very good habit to get into. So I'm just going to type some comments here. If I could spell. There we go. So I put my comments on what I was thinking when I made these variables. So this is all I'm going to want to do for the create right now. Actually, no, I want to define some more variables, right? I also want to make something called speed. So I'm going to do SPD, because if you notice life and life max are like in blue, that means that they're variables defined by me. If I do speed, you see how it's in green? This is a built-in variable. This is something that GameMaker has automatically. I don't want to overwrite or mess with that because it would just throw errors. So I'm going to make my own. That's just that only pertains to this object that I'm doing. Like, I don't want to set the global speed for the whole game. I just want to set the speed just for this object. And I'm going to determine what that value is by storing it in this variable called SPD, which is short for speed. So I'm just going to say 5. I'm going to probably tweak this later, but this is what I want to do. So there we go. So now let's go add the event and the step event. Now the step event, this is where a lot of the magic happens. Basically in GameMaker, your default game speed is like 60, let's just say frames per second, 60 FPS. GameMaker will run this step event 60 times a second. So this is where you can run all your code that you're going to want to run to, like, you know, check to see if you're hit or check to see if your life is below 0. You should probably like be dead or whatever. So let's just go to step here and I'm going to add in some code. The first thing I want to do before I do anything is I want to make it able to move my player. So let's get into probably the biggest thing in programming. This is the if statement. Basically, how you're communicating to your computer is you're basically playing the what if game every second. Like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? Do that. So the syntax for that is you do if, which is it comes up in a special color. This is a keyword, and in parentheses. So just for example, an example, if something happens, then we're going to do these brackets. Did I hit insert on accident? I did. There we go. Do right? So this is basically what we're going to do. If something happens, then do this because of it. So for example, if I want to check that I want to be able to move. So how I want to move is I'm playing keyboard, right? So I want to do WASD. So I'm going to check for keyboard input. Now every programming language, engine, environment you're using has its own way of doing it. There's built-in functions that are like tools that you can use. So I'm going to do something called keyboard. And if I let it do autocomplete, you see a bunch of functions here. Keyboard check, keyboard check pressed, keyboard check released. So these are built-in things that GameMaker provides that you don't have to program. It just does it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if keyboard check, and it wants a key. This is a quirk of GameMaker. I have to specify ord, which is like an ordinary thing. I can put W. So if keyboard check ord W, what's it doing? I might need another bracket. It looks like, yeah, I need another bracket. So the syntax, like the thing is really up to you. If you want to add like spaces in between your brackets so you can see what you're doing. Some people like to do that. So if we just take this here, ord is just a little built-in function that translates a letter to a key on your keyboard. That's all it does. So all we're doing is we're saying, hey, keyboard check W key. So what this is saying is if W is pressed, what do we do? So let's do movement. Up. So W is going to be up. So what we're going to do to basically provide movement is we want to move the X coordinate or the Y coordinate of our player up. So remember, the vertical axis, the Y-axis, starts at the top. And the greater that number, the farther down it goes. So we want to subtract from that number. So Y is a built-in variable that applies to this object. So what we can do is we could do Y minus equals. What this does is that it's going to subtract from whatever the current value is. If we just did like Y minus 5, it wouldn't do that because we're not setting anything. Like if we wanted to do Y equals Y minus 5, which is the current value minus 5, that is an acceptable way of doing it. But that minus equals just lets you do that without having to say that. This is just subtract 5 from whatever the current value is. Now, because what if I want to change this value a bunch? I'm going to set it to my variable that I set earlier, speed. So I want to subtract the speed from whatever my Y is. And if we just save this real quick. So now I have the capability to move up while the key is pressed. Now if I go to my room here, this is basically my level. I can drag my player onto the screen and just put him wherever I want. Now with the room you can do a whole bunch of stuff. You can set the dimensions, you can set up cameras, you can set like backgrounds and stuff like that. You can add a bunch of objects in, this is where you basically create your levels. You can do that. So let's hit the play button up here. Oh wait, this is play animation. I want to hit this play button up here. Run. I'm going to run the game. Okay, so we have our game. I'm going to press W. I can see that we're moving up because we're just moving that Y value of our object around. So now we have to do that for everything. And I also notice that like it doesn't change the way our mage looks or whatever. So we're going to do left, down, and right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I mean, you could type it if you want to. I'm just going to copy and paste this a bunch, and I'm going to edit it on the fly. Boom. So if we're left, we're going to be checking for the A key. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be, if we're moving left or right, that's on the x-axis, that's horizontal. X starts at the left. So we also want to decrease that if we want to keep going left. So I'm going to do X minus speed. Now for down, it's going to be the S key. We're going to want to do a plus equals, which is to add whatever is to the current value. And then lastly, to move right, we're going to want to press the D key, and we're going to want to change this x-axis. We're going to increase that, because the more that we increase X, the more it moves to the right. So if we save this, and I run this game again, I should be able to move around now. There we go. So this gives you a little insight into keyboard check. Now there's other ways. There's like keyboard check pressed. There's also keyboard check released. So for example, when I go to launch my Fireball, if I do keyboard check, let's say like or even mouse check to check a mouse click, if I just do check it while I'm clicking it, it's going to continuously run that code. It would spam like a bunch of fireballs, and that would look weird. I only want to do it once per click, so I can do either, you know, mouse check pressed or mouse check released, and then when that happens, it would do whatever you have in that code block. So let's also make the player face where your mouse is, so it's more intuitive to aim. So make the player face the mouse position. So what we can do is that we basically have to rotate our sprite to face that direction. Now, how do we calculate that direction? GameMaker helps us with that. So there is a function called point direction, and it takes in 4 arguments. So a function is just basically, it's like a little worker thing, right? It say it's like, you know, you give a chef ingredients to make a food, and then they do whatever they do in the kitchen, and then they bring you the food, right? That's what a function does. This is basically like your own personal cook. It does its own thing for you and then returns whatever you want based on what you provided it. So what we can do is that we want to get that value. So I'm trying to think of a clean way of doing this. So this is the problem with programming, is that if you put 20 programmers in a room and tell them to develop a solution, you're going to get 20 different solutions. There is no really wrong way of doing something. There's more optimal ways. There's better ways. Some ways might have pros and cons. As I like to say, this may not be the way to do something, but it's a way to do something. So you can always refine and improve later on, but it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. So just don't let your dreams be dreams because you want it to be perfect. You got to get in there and make some mistakes. So I want to make the player face the mouse position, right? So how does that happen? There's going to be something called image angle. This is a built-in variable. So this is the image angle of the object. So I have this SPR player assigned to this object, so I can control that image angle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say image angle equals, and I'm going to do point direction. So this takes x1, y1, which is like your origin. So this is going to be my player, to my target, which is going to be x2, y2, which is going to be my mouse x and y coordinates, which thankfully GameMaker also has built in. So I can do point direction. I'm going to do x and y for my current x and y position. And I'm going to do mouse underscore x and mouse underscore y. There we go. So if I save this and I run the game, now it faces our mouse. So whenever we're moving around, we could be shooting pew, 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 pew. We could be launching fireballs. That's basically how we do that. Now, how do I know all this stuff? Obviously, I've used this a bunch, but how would a new person know this? if you hit F1, you can bring up, it probably doesn't capture because it brings open a web browser. Let me see if I can get that. Okay, so you should be able to see my web browser now. This brings open the GameMaker manual. Now, this has everything you need to know in the game. It might not be intuitive or concise, but it's got the stuff in there. So, for example, if I want to learn about objects and instances, I can go search for like objects, and I could get some results for that, and it'll take me to objects, and I can learn about objects. If I want to learn what a particular function does, so for example, if I want to learn about keyboard check, I could keyboard check. I can go right to that, and it'll bring me to this function here, and it'll tell you exactly what it does. So a lot of my initial forays into game development with GameMaker was mostly me looking on forums to see how people were doing things. And I ended up getting like a little bit of a toolbox of common functions I always used all the time. Like, for example, keyboard check, mouse check, point direction, all those are like stuff I use all the time. Those are great stuff. So let's make it so our wizard will throw a fireball. Okay? So the first thing we need to do is we need to make a fireball object, because we're going to make the player create an instance of a fireball object, and then we're going to set some code that determines what it does. So for example, let's make an object. I'm going to name this obj fireball, and for the sprite, I'm going to use SPR fireball. There we go. Now I don't need to add any variables right now to it. I just need to have the object created. So I'm just going to save. And then what we're going to do now is in my step event, I'm going to check for mouse input, right? Let's see. We're going to throw a fireball. Pew pew. So if mouse check button, and we're going to want to do, I'm going to do released, just in case you want to aim it. I'm going to do a mouse check button released. Now GameMaker also gives us a predefined button. If we do MB left, that will work. Now how did I know that? If we go back to our keyboard check here, let's go look up mouse check. Mouse check button released. This gives you a bunch of constants that you can use. So left, middle, right, side 1, side 2, MB any for any mouse button or no mouse button. There's a bunch of presets and stuff that are already in there. So when we release the left mouse button, we're going to want to create a fireball. Now, what I'm going to do is that you could just do instance create, and we have two options: instance create depth or layer. Now depth is sort of like a third axis. It's basically if you want to be able to layer images on top of each other. The greater the depth, the farther back it is on the thing. So we want our fireball to probably be above our player. Or let's start with it underneath our player sprite. So we're going to do instance create depth. So we need to specify the XY of where we're going to create this, the depth that we're going to create it at, and what object are we creating. So we're going to make this at our XY, and we're going to make it at our depth. We're going to do our own depth plus 1. So it's going to be just one farther back than we are. And the object that we're creating is obj fireball. So again, this is programming language. This is telling the computer what we want it to do. So we're going to create a fireball. So let's just save that and then see what happens. So cool. Boom, I create a fireball, but it's not flying or doing anything. Why not? We haven't told it to do anything. So this is something that took me longer than I care to admit when I first started out learning. When you do like an instance create, you can save that to a variable. So what I mean by that is I can do like var fireball equals. I don't think you have to specify var here. I can just do fireball equals. And then what I can do is that I can change properties of this fireball by doing stuff like this. So I can do fireball dot direction, which is the direction that it's going to be traveling in. I can set that to my image angle. So if you have like so this instance create basically gives me like an object ID, like a instance ID. So this is the ID of this object that I just created. So it's only going to influence that object that I created, not anything previously. So this fireball that I just created, I'm going to set this fireball's direction to my own image angle. Now I also want to move. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to set fireball speed, which is the speed that that's going to be moving. I'm going to set it to, let's do 15. We want that to move faster than we can move. I can change that later, but I'm going to set that to 15. And we also want to, let's just save that to see how that works. Boom. So we're launching fireballs, but you might notice a problem. The fireballs are going backwards. There's also another huge problem too. Those fireballs are just going out endlessly. There's nothing stopping them. They don't disappear once they go on the screen. They're still going. So if we look at our task manager and we look at our runner, we just created a memory leak. So as those keep going, our memory usage is going to keep going up as it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger values. So what we have to do is we have to add safeguards to that too. So let's solve the first problem of making it face the way we want it to go. This one's actually pretty easy. We do fireball image angle, and we're just going to make it equal our image angle again. There you go. So that will make it point wherever it's going to go. The next thing we need to do is we need to fix the fireball endlessly moving. So if we go down to our fireball here, I'm going to add an event, and I'm going to create. Now what I'm going to do here is make it so the fireball doesn't last forever. And I'm going to make a variable called expire. And I'm just going to set it to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to make a counter. And now in this step event, we're going to increment our expire counter. So expire, I'm just going to do plus plus, which is just add whatever you want. This is the same as plus equals 1. So you can do it either way, whichever way works best for you. I'm just going to do expire plus plus because that I'm going to do plus equals 1 because I think that looks a little better. Now check if our expiration has come. So now what I can do is just another if statement. If expire is greater than or equal to, let's see, how long do we want this to last? So a step event roughly runs 60 times a second, right? What if we want it to last 3 seconds? So 3 times 60 is 180. So let's just say if it lasts longer than 180, because every step we're going to be incrementing this by 1. If expire greater or equal to 180, then we're going to want to destroy this instance because we don't want it to just last forever. So what we can just do is we can just do instance destroy. And there's a bunch of arguments that you can pass into this, but this function itself, if we go back to our help manual, and we look up instance destroy, you can see that a lot of this stuff is optional. If you don't pass in any arguments, it will just destroy itself. So you have this sample code here. You know, if it's missing the if. That's weird. There's a typo in the code. That's interesting. But if hit points is less than equal 0, then destroy instance, right? So that's what their little code snippet's doing. So we can just do instance destroy. If we want to test this to make sure that it actually works, I can set this to maybe 30. So it only lasts half a second. So let's test this. And I want to visually see that our fireballs are being deleted. So let me move off to the left here. I'm going to fire to the right. You can see that the fireballs are now being destroyed. And they're also facing the way that we shoot them. So this looks a lot better already. Look at that. We got a fireball launching. Let me go back and just set that to 3 seconds again here. So we can do 180. That's about 3 seconds. There we go. Roughly 3 seconds. Cool. There we go. We got fireballs, but now we need to like add a monster to fight, right? So let me just make another sprite really quick. Sprite, SPR baddie. And I'm going to edit this image, and I'm just going to make a quick bad guy. What do we want to fight? Let's fight like orcs or something, right? So I'm going to do like a big torso. I'm going to do a big old fatty head. I'm going to cut out some of this stuff here. Boom. There we go. We got like a torso. We got like a top-down torso dealio, right? So now we're going to add some like angry eyes. I'm an orc and I hate everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and I'm going to flip it. Boom, look at that. And we got that. Let's do some red. I think this is red. We need to set this back. So one neat thing about the editor is that when you copy something, it sort of makes it like its own brush. So you can do some interesting stuff with that. So I've got angry eyes, I guess. I need to add like a mouth. Boom, we'll add like a mouth here, and maybe I'll put like some tusks. Yeah, because he's like an orc, right? We gotta make him an orc. And I will just do like this color, like a nasty green yellow, I think, for like his tusks. And then I'm gonna make him green. There we go. So there we go. I got like an orc dude. I can add some hands. You know what? Let me just make the hands off here so I can copy them. So I'm going to copy. I'll put a hand like right here. You know, we'll put a hand like right here and a hand like right here. Perfect. Look at that. We got hands. And let's see. I'm going to make this guy. Let's see. In his left hand, I'm going to give him a shield. So I'm going to do... And see, this is just the fun that you can just have creating your own game. You can make it however you want. I'm going to give him like a little shieldy dealio here. This is obviously super in depth. I'm going to make this... I don't know if that's brown or not. Where's brown? I guess we're going to do this color because I don't know. I'm going to fill that in. And then I'll give him... I don't know, like an axe or something. Because orcs love axes. Okay, so we've got our basic axe. I don't know. That looks kind of axe-like. I'm going to call it good. I'm going to dye this bad boy gray. I'm going to dye this thing like the brown or whatever, the orange brown I used earlier, and then I want to use the same green for the hands. And there we go. we have a baddie orc. Now I realize I just did something bad. I drew him facing left. I need to make him face the other way. So what I can do is I can go up here to image, and I can go to, I can mirror, or I can flip. I'm going to go to mirror, selected frames. There we go. So now he's facing to the right. So cool. There we go. I have an orc, but now his shield is in the right hand and his axe is in the left. I don't like that. I want him to be right-handed. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to flip. Boom. There we go. Now he's where he should be. I'm going to save. Cool. We have our sprite. We need to make sure to set the origin to the center. Otherwise, he'll, like, when he rotates, he'll just rotate like around the corner, and that'll look really weird. So we want to make sure that we're origin in the center here, because we're making a top-down game. I'm going to save that. I'm going to get rid of that for now, and I'm going to create another object. Create object. And I'm going to name this guy OBJ. You know what? Actually, I'm going to show you guys the power of parent objects. So let me give you a hypothetical scenario, right, that you'll probably run into. You're probably going to have more than one type of bad guy, right? Well, if I program this fireball object to collide with an orc, I also don't want to program it to collide with skeletons, goblins, werewolves, wolves, like whatever other monsters you want to add in. I don't want to program every single one of those interactions. I want them all to do the same thing. If I hit a bad guy, do damage to them and like kill them or whatever. So I'm going to name this, I'm going to just make an empty object called object enemy. You can name it whatever you want, object bad guy, OBJ baddies, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to say object enemy. And I'm just not going to add anything to this object. Okay? That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to create it and then forget about it. I'm going to create another object. And I'm going to make this one my orc guy. Object orc bro. I'm going to set his sprite to be my baddie sprite. Now, if you see here, we have parent. I'm going to set his parent object to object enemy. So what this means is that I can program my fireball to like collide and deal damage with enemies, and it will affect any of the children objects. So it might collide with object orc bro, but because object orc bro is a child of object enemy, it'll still apply to it. I'll show you here in a second. So now that we have our orc bro dude, let's put him on our room. So if I double click on room here, I'm just going to add a few object orc bros. They're not going to do anything yet because we haven't told them to, but you know, we want to do damage to them. So now our fireball, I'm going to program, I'm going to add an event. And there's an event called a collision event. And you can specify what object you want it to be able to collide with. So what this event does is that whenever GameMaker detects that these two objects are colliding, the fireball and an enemy, it'll trigger whatever we have in this code block. So now we can do damage to enemy. Now I'm not going to do the damage part right now, because that's just a matter of like setting a life variable on my object orc bro, and then when I collide, I want to be able to subtract that life. I'll get into that in just a second, but I want to show you what the collision stuff does for now. So what we can do is that there's a special keyword called other. So there's this constant other. So in this event, in the scope of this collision event, the keyword other can reference the other object that you're colliding with. Now, GameMaker will crash if you try to do something with a reference object that doesn't exist anymore. So an example of this is, say for example, you had 500 wizards throwing fireballs at the same orc, right? The collision events may all fire at the same time, and you say the orc might be destroyed in 2 hits. If the orc is dead and you're trying to like decrease the life value of a destroyed object, GameMaker is just going to crash. So what we want to do to avoid that is we want to first check if the instance exists anymore. Instance exists still. Now what we can do is if instance exists, and then we could put other. So if other still exists, like if it hasn't been destroyed yet, then what we can do is we can specify the action that we want to do to it. So we can say instance still exists, do some damage. Right? Now I haven't programmed the damage part yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say as soon as I hit an orc, I just want to kill it for now. So I'm going to add a to-do. For now, we're just killing the orc instantly. We need to implement damage later. Right? So I can add this to-do. So while I have the idea fresh in my head, I can just implement something just to get it up and running, and then when I come back to the code, say tomorrow or like a week after I've been worked on it, I don't have to guess to see what I was trying to do. I can just put comments on what I'm thinking right now, and I can instantly get back up to speed and get back at it. So I'm just going to say other instance destroy. Maybe I have to do right. So we're going to use a statement called a with other. And what this does is, this was really confusing to me at first, but the with statement basically allows you to execute code as if you're this guy. So what I can do is I can say with other, and since this collision event is referencing this object orc bro guy, it's the equivalent of me putting like instance destroy in this guy's code. So I can say instance destroy. Right? So this inside this with, this instance destroy is running on this guy's code. So it's not going to delete my fireball, it's going to delete this guy. So let's try this now. I'm going to save. I'm going to hit play. And then so now I should be able to launch a fireball. Boom, destroys him. But it doesn't destroy my fireball though, right? The fireball just goes right through them. So if I lined up a bunch of orcs, I can just plow right through them, right? So what we also want to do, destroy ourselves. So we're going to do instance destroy here. And because this isn't running in that with block, this is actually going to destroy ourselves. So if we hit play on this now, the fireball should delete the orc, and also it should delete itself. Boom. Look at that. We're killing baddies, baby. Cool. I've probably been recording for a while. I've been recording for about an hour, but I'm going to keep going. Because I'm having fun, and maybe people will find this useful. So if need be, what I might do is I might break it out into short sections. But I'm just gonna keep going. So let's implement the damage really quick. And then I would say the last things I want to implement are, I want the orc to be able to attack me as well. And I also want the fireball to like cause like an explosion thing when it hits something. So I'm going to implement those. So we've got fireball working. Let's add some code to the orc guy, right? Establish some variables. So we want life. We're gonna do 50 for this guy. We're also gonna do life max because we want to do health bars. I will get into that. Life. And let's see. I also want to be able to attack me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare some other variables. I'm going to do target equals no one. Now, no one is a special built-in variable. I use target to primarily keep track of like what object or instance that this guy's tracking. So I'm going to set target to no one. So keep track of target instance. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do target range. I'm going to say, let's do 180. You know, we can do whatever it is, but how close the, let's see, if player is within range, this orc will try to attack him. And then what we can do is we can specify attack range. And this will be, let's say 32. We want him to be within 32 pixels of us. The range at which this orc will actually attack. And then what I can do is I can do damage. Now you can do damage like a set value, or if you want to do like a random amount, like, you know, a lot of RPGs have like, oh, it does 3 to 5 damage. You could do like a damage min. You can name these variables whatever you want. You can name them dmin, you can name it min-dam, minimum damage, whatever you want to do. I'm just going to do damage min. And I'm going to say this equals, we're going to do 5. And then damage max equals 10. Not 120. Holy cow, that'd be massive. Equals 10. Right? All these little warning signs here are just saying that, hey, we create a variable, but we're not using it. We'll get into that a little later. And then, so, yeah. Let's see. Damage calculations. Cool. So we've got that. And I also want to do an attack timer because I don't want him to keep spamming me with attacks if he's in range. I want to have like a little bit of a cooldown. Like maybe he'll attack like once a second or whatever. So I'm going to also add an attack timer. I'm going to make this 0. Timer to prevent orc from spam killing me instantly. Because if I didn't have that, he would basically attack me 60 times in a single second. So I don't want to do that. And I'm going to do attack timer max. So I want him to do, let's say, a second. So maximum timer. So I just made a bunch of variables, right? But how am I going to use those? So these are all going to be in the step event. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to step, and we're going to program some really basic AI, right? So what we want to do is we want to check if the player exists, first of all. And then if it does exist, how close is it to us, right? So we want to do if instance exists. We're going to do object player, obj player. Cool. Player exists. How close are they to us? Now it's important to check that the player exists, because what happens if we die and we destroy our instance? Then the orcs are going to try to attack somebody who doesn't exist, and the game's going to crash. So whenever you're like referencing an object, you always want to do instance exists. It prevents that from happening. It prevents those crashes. It's going to save your life. So player exists. How close are they to us? So if now we're going to use another built-in function. So if we go to our help manual and we type in distance, there's a distance to object. There's a convenient function here for us to use already. So we can just say distance to object. This function calculates the distance from the edge of the bounding box of the calling instance to the nearest edge of the nearest instance. So what this means is that if I go back into GameMaker here and I look at my player sprite, or let's say this fireball sprite. Let me pull up a sprite here. This is actually a square. It's not a circle. If we look at the collision mask, it's like a rectangle around it. We can make it circular if we want to, but basically if it's calculating the distance from these edges here. So that's another cool trick. You can change masks and stuff like that on your sprites. So for example, if I wanted to only collide with like this little bit right here, I could set that. So if an orc like collides with this part, it won't trigger it. But if it collides with this little part here, this darkened square, it will trigger it. So that adds like a little bit of accuracy thing. If I make it the full image, then you get those weird hitbox things where it's like you missed the guy, but you still did a headshot somehow or something, right? So this helps prevent that. So we've got that. I'm going to save that. And let's just use distance to object. And what we need to do is I want to set that player as our target as well. So player exists, assign target. And now we can go, how close are they to us? So what we're going to do is we're going to do target equals, and how do we get the instance ID? So what we can do is we can say instance nearest, right? So if we do instance nearest, this gets us the nearest, so X, Y, that's our coordinates. We're going to do object player. Cool. So since I'm the only object player, that's fine. This is also great for like recording, like say if I make it so that my mage can summon like skeletons, like maybe he's a necromancer, right? And I summon a bunch of skeletons that the orcs would also attack. They can get the nearest enemy to from their perspective, right? They can get the nearest good guy and they can target that. So distance to object, target. So if distance to object target, we want this to be less or equal to target range, right? So if it's less or equal to, that means that they are within our range. So they are in range. Move towards them. So what we can do is we can set our we can basically make our orc bro face us. So we'll do image angle equals point direction, our XY coordinates, and then target XY coordinates. So anytime you have like a dot after something, you're referencing something from that. So I'm talking about targets X and Y. So point direction from me to my target. That's basically how we do that. And then, so we got it facing that way. Let's also set our direction. Now to avoid doing that calculation again, I can just set that to my image angle, because that should be the same. Direction is also a 360-degree thing, just like image angle. So I'm going to set my direction to whatever my value of my image angle is. That way I'm facing the way, and I'm going to move that way too. And move towards them. So they are in range. Move towards them. Face target. Set our direction to move towards the target. And then we're going to actually move towards the target. Now I should go back to create here, and I should also add a speed variable. Let's make this 4. Maybe their slow dumb works, you know. So we're going to move towards the target. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say, let's look up our help manual here, because I don't remember what the functions are. I think there's like a move towards or something like that. So if I do move underscore move towards point. Here we go. So here I can move towards an XY coordinate at a certain speed. That sounds like exactly what we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move towards point. I'm going to move toward our target X and Y. And the speed I'm going to move at is the speed that we have set. Now, the reason why I'm not just putting 4 here is that if I'm using speed in a bunch of different parts in this, if I want to change the speed, I don't want to go through and set speed for every code block. I can just go to one spot and change that here. So if I want this guy to be faster everywhere, I can set this to like 6 and he'll be like Mega Hulk speed, right? So I'm going to set to 4 for now. And I save. Cool. So he's moving towards us. Awesome. Now we want to check and see if we're in range to attack, right? If let's see, are we in range to attack? So what we're going to do here is if, again, distance to object, target, because in this code block, we already verified that target exists. So everything here, we already know that target exists, so we can reference this just fine. If distance to object target is less than or equal to our attack range, there we go. Then what we can do is they are in range. Attack! And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a to-do for now. So what I want to do is I want to verify that this will at least get the orc moving towards me before I get too much farther in coding this. So let's save and play. So if I get closer... Oh, he's moving after me. Get away. Now, he doesn't stop moving if I go out of range. So I have to code that. So what I can do is that I can do on this if statement here where I'm seeing if he's within range, I can do else. They are not in range at all. Stop moving. So then what I can do is I can just set his speed to 0. There you go. So if we run this now, and he gets close to me, if I get out of his range, he should just stop. So maybe I'll get like a bunch of orcs coming after me, right? Oh my god, they're everywhere. Ah! So you see how they're all stacking on top of each other? I don't have any like collision code to keep them separate yet. That's something that you can add later. Actually, I might do that right now, just so I can show you that. So if we do a collision event, I want it so that if we collide with other object enemies, that they don't stack up together. So what we can do here is that prevent baddies from stacking on one another. So we want to ensure that the other exists. Remember, because when a collision event triggers, we can reference the object that we're colliding with the other keyword, the other constant. So if ensure other object still exists, if instance exists, other. So let's do if they are in range. So instance exists, other. They exist. Let's make sure we don't stack. So what we're going to do is that if we have two objects that are colliding, we want them to basically move away from each other a little bit. So how we're going to do that is that we're going to be working with our XY coordinates. So what we can do is that if other.x is greater than rx, so what this is going to do is that if the person that we're colliding with, if their x is greater than ours, that means that they're to our right. That means that we want to move a little bit to the left. And also, when this event fires with them, they're going to move a little bit to the right. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that rx, see, they're to our right, we want to move left, is going to be minus equal 1. So there we go. We did that. Now we're going to copy this and say if other x is less than rx, that means they're to our left. We're going to want to move to the right. And we're going to do the same thing for the y-axis. See how much we're able to do with just if statements? This is just the computer playing the what if game super fast. That's all it is. So if we do other y is greater than y, greater goes down, so that means that they're below us. That means we want to move ourselves up. And if other y is less than ours, that means that they're above us, so we want to move down. Boom. Cool. So now this should stop them from stacking up on each other. It might look a little janky, but we'll see how it works. So we get them all up here. There you go. See how they're not able to stack? Because they're basically, when they collide with each other, they're kind of pushing each other back. So there we go. Get out of here, baddies. Boom. I'm a badass wizard. Look at this. I'm making a sweet wizard game. And it's only been like, what, like an hour? It's been an hour and 20 minutes so far. So we're not doing too bad. So let's, we handled the collision. We did that good. Let's handle actually dealing damage. So let me think how I want to do this. So when a fireball hits, I also want to have like an explosion, right? So how would I handle that? What I would do is I would create a sprite of the explosion. And what I would do is that I would create another object called like object fireball explosion. And when my fireball hits somebody, I want it to create that explosion object and then like delete the fireball itself. And then I want that explosion effect to do the damage for me. So let's make that happen. So if we go to sprites, create another sprite. Boom. We're going to be SPR fireball Splody. Again, you could name this whatever you want. Explosion. I'm going to name it Splody because that's what I feel like doing. And say I want this to be a mega huge explosion. I can go here to resize canvas and maybe I want to make this 96 by 96, right? I want this to be a bit of a bigger explosion. So what I can do is I'm going to do a very simple explosion animation here, and we can refine it later if we want to. So let's just make some placeholder art, right? So I'm going to make a basic circle there. I'm going to make this pig yellow. I'm going to add another frame. I'm going to make a little bigger explosion. I'm also make this yellow. And then I'm going to add another frame. And I'm going to make this one even bigger. And this time I'm going to add like a little ring around it. So like it's like a fireball ring or whatever, you know? A fire donut, if you will. Boom, there we go. I'm going to add one last frame. And I'm going to make this, boom, all the way down to here, I think. Let me zoom out just a little bit. Yeah, there we go. And I'm going to make this ring like right here. There. So now, if we play this sprite, let's say 5, and then we play the animation. Boom, look at that. It's like an explosion. If we want to speed this up, maybe we can do 15. So if I don't want to loop it, boom, you can see, oh, it goes back and forth. There we go. Boom, boom, boom. We just made a fireball explosion effect. We also need to make sure that we center it, so that way it explodes in the right spot. Otherwise, like the fireball would be here, and then when it explodes, it would create the explosion like up here, and it would look all derpy. So we don't want to do that. So save that. So we have our Splody sprite. let's make an object. I'm gonna do Alt-O to be all snazzy. I'm gonna do object fireball splody. I'm gonna set this sprite to be my splody sprite. And in the, let's see, in the create event, I'm gonna specify a target variable. Actually, you know what? No, we're gonna ignore that because I want to check and see if it's colliding with anybody. So I'm gonna add in, I don't think I need to do anything. I just need to add in like damage. Do damage min. We're gonna say it does, oh, let's say 15 damage to damage max is 30. 15 to 30 damage. I like that. Cool. So now we've got that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna add an event. We're gonna add a, let's see, you're gonna add a collision event with object enemy. Let's see. So we don't want it to deal damage like the entire time that the animation's playing, because that might be a while. So what we want to do is we might have to do a little bit of manual collision. So this is good stuff here. So let's add an event. And if we go to other, we have an animation end event. So as soon as this fireball splody is created, that sprite's going to start playing its animation. And by default, like it would loop it. But if we set an event that the animation ends, as soon as it finishes that last frame, it's going to trigger this code. So what we can do in that end event is we can make it deal the damage to anybody that it's currently hitting, and then also delete itself. So what we're going to do here is, let's get rid of this. Let's change event. I'm going to change this to other animation end. And what we're going to do here is we want to damage any enemies that we are colliding with. So what we need to do is, how do we check who we are colliding with? It's been a while since I've done this. So collide. Let's see. Looks like we have a thing called place meeting. With this function, you can check a position for collision with any other instance or all instances of an object using collision mask of the instance. Cool. So we can just check if place meeting our X and Y with whatever object we want to collide with. This should work. When you use this, you are effectively asking GameMaker Studio 2 to move instance to a new position. Check for a collision. That might not be what we want to do. Maybe instance place. With this function, you can check a position for a collision with another instances or all instances of an object using collision mask. Okay. This function will return the unique instance ID of the object being collided, but if that is not needed, it is slightly faster to use the function place meeting. This function also accepts special keywords all and other, and will return the keyword none if no collision occurs. Okay. So we have instance place. So this will give me this will give me like an ID that I can set to like my target or whatever, and I can lower my life's target that way, because I don't have access to that other keyword when I'm not using that collision event. So this is good stuff. I'm learning stuff new. So let's see. But we want to be able to do more. Instance place list. What's the difference between that? So we're creating a data structure list. See, this is what sometimes like it's really helpful to kind of try to read what code is doing too. So we are creating what is colliding with our XY, the object. We're going to add it to our list, and this is ordered. Whether the list should be ordered by distance. That's handy. That's good stuff. So if num is greater than 0, we can iterate through everyone in our list and deal damage to them. See, this is a pretty handy code snippet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to import this into my code. I can do a special type of comment, like a multi-line comment, by doing this, slash with a star and then a star and a slash after. So this is the code that I want to basically sort of implement. Copying and pasting code's never going to work just right, so you always want to make sure you understand the code and that you can work with it. So what we're going to do is get the list of the enemies that we are colliding with. So we're going to, let's see, you're going to do, so var declares a temporary variable that's only accessible like within this little code snippet. GameMaker's kind of lenient. If you just declare a variable, it'll sort of make it for you automatically. It could be a good habit to get into using var if you're going to be using other programming languages, but for now I'm just going to keep it simple. So list equals ds list create. So this is a data structure. So if we look at this is a more complex topic, but if we go to let's do data structures. Data structures. Here we go. So in games, you often need to store information in a precise and ordered way. For example, you may need to store lists of items a person carries, or you want to store a grid of places that's something to be visited. These are how you do that. So there's different types of stuff. There's grids, there's lists, there's maps, priority queues, and stacks. That's a whole different complex topic. For a list, it's just basically just a list of stuff. So all I'm getting is just a list of a bunch of instance IDs of objects that I'm colliding with. It's a bit complex for beginner stuff, but I think that seeing this in action will actually help you out quite a bit. So I'm going to go through the effort and code this here. So ds list create, that just gives us a list. So now what we can do is, let's see, number of enemies equals instance place list x, y. We're going to do object enemy. We're going to do list. And we're going to do false. It doesn't matter if it's ordered or not. So what this does is it will get any instance that's colliding with us, store it in our list, and then it returns the number of objects that you collided with. So then we can do our logic here. Did we even collide with anything? Which we should have. If number of enemies, let's do, yeah, greater than 0. So that means that we did collide with something. 1 or more. We can iterate through. So this is a for loop. So this is where you can loop through and do a bunch of stuff. This is a very powerful programming tool. So what we're doing here for this for loop is we're declaring a local variable I, which is like index. You want to keep track of the count of iterations. So you can also, this is just a counter for the iteration that you're going through. So we're going to start at 0. We're going to do I is less than the number of enemies. And then we're going to just do I plus equals 1. We're going to increment that by 1 every time. So what this does is that every time this loop iterates, it's going to increment that until this is no longer true, and then it's going to exit out of that loop. So again, computers are super dumb. They only do exactly what you tell them to do, and sometimes that language just gets a bit hectic. So we're doing that. So let's do our damage here. So verify that the instance still exists. So if, again, instance exists, this should be your go-to by now. Instance exists. And what we can do is we can do our list. And since a list is like an array, it stores it like indexed. So what that looks like is that it's basically like a array. So if I do list, the first index starts at 0 equals baddie 1, and then list 1, which is the second index, equals baddie 2. It'll go through that here, so I can reference this value stored in the list by the index. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through, since we're starting at 0, we should be able to use our I. So hey, whatever is in this here, this current iteration, I want you to fetch this and see if it still exists. And since we know that we're not going above the number of enemies, which is how many entries are in that list, we know that we're not going to try to access something in the list that doesn't exist. So say if a list only has like 2 values, but you try to access the third value, it's going to crash the game. So verify the instance still exists. Instance exists, lists I. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say they exist, do damage. So what we can do here, actually let's clean this up a little bit. Let's do target. Let's do var target equals list I. So I'm only accessing that list once. And this will look more like code that we've done before. Does our target exist? Now this is yellow now because I used var, which is a local variable. So this variable is only available within this scope. Like it's not going to be accessible outside of this at all. So they do exist, do damage. So we can do target life minus equals. And now we have to calculate our damage. So again, we have damage min and damage max. So what we can do is that we can do a random between that. So if we do something called irandom range. I stands for integer, which is just a whole number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are all integers. We don't want like, 15.8 or 29.999999. We don't want that. We just want straight numbers. So we're doing irandom range. If you just did random range, it would do those decimals. It would just pick a random decimal between the range you specify. So we have x1, x2. This is the range. So we're going to do damage min and damage max. So it'll pick a number, a random number between 15 and 30. And it will deal that much damage. Cool. So it's going to do that. It's going to randomize that calculation for every object that we are colliding with. Cool. So now we have that. Number of enemies. Cool. So now we've done that. Damage calculations. Calculations are done. Delete ourselves so we don't keep looping animation. And now we're just going to do an instance destroy. So I think that, oh, I forgot a bracket here. I forgot a parenthesis. Here we go. There we go. So this code should work now. I think I've got it commented pretty well what it does. So let's save and let's run it. Oh, I didn't make it create the fireball thing yet. Whoops. Okay, so the fireball. Now we have to change this. So what we're going to do is we're going to destroy ourselves. We're going to keep that. But what we're going to do here is create an instance of an explosion. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to do instance create depth xy. So it's going to create it on my coordinates. And I want it to be above us. So like it'll be above stuff. So maybe we'll do depth Let's do minus depth minus 5. I want it to be like above everybody, so all you see is like the explosion, because I want it to be huge. And then we're gonna do object fireball splody. Cool. So as soon as we collide with something, we're going to create this splody object, and we're just going to destroy ourselves. So now this fireball explosion thing should work. Boom. Ah, see, I messed up something. I crashed it. Trying to index a variable which is not array. Target equal list I. Interesting. Okay. So let's go look at lists. Oh, you can use an accessor. So this is just how you access it. So that's a weird syntax thing. So let's do what they're doing. We're going to access with a pipe. I'm going to do exactly what they're doing and try it out. So let me run it again. Boom. Okay, so it's doing it, but I haven't added... I haven't made it so that the orcs die when their life goes down. Again, computers are stupid. So, if we go here to step event, I can add, make sure we are not invincible. So all we're going to do here is if life ever gets less than or equal to 0, we did. Instance destroy. Boom. So now we can save it. So now, if we run this, there. Now they're actually getting destroyed. Cool. So we've been going on for a long time. Last thing I want to do is health bars. So what we can do is we can add an event called a draw event. Now, a draw is a special event where you can do additional things with sprites and stuff like that other than your own sprite. If you do a draw event, you always need to specify draw self. Because we are in a draw event, we need to always draw ourself. So if you don't have a draw event, GameMaker handles that for you. But if you are doing a draw event, then GameMaker's like, okay, you're gonna handle your own draw stuff. You gotta do it yourself. So our sprite, all we have to do is just draw self. Otherwise, like, our guy would be invisible. When I first encountered this, it took me forever to figure this out. So just pro tip. Now what we can do is draw a health bar. So what we can do here is there's actually a function I think it's called draw health bar. Here it is, perfect. So let's actually look at this function here, draw health bar. So if we search for this function, with this function you can draw a colored bar to a constant value. So here it lists the arguments and like what they are. So this will be where the XY coordinates. So this is basically drawing a box on where you're going to draw the health bar at. And then the amount that it needs to show, this is a percentage. Again, between 1 and 100, so this is a percentage. The color of the background, the minimum color, the max color. So for example, like if you want your health bar, like when you're max, you want it to be green, you want to be good. But if you start getting down low, you want to start showing red, you can do that. The direction that it's going to be, and this shows this here, like whether it's going to go forwards or backwards, whether you want to show the background or not, or if you want to show a border, you can add those flags in there. So what we're going to do is just draw a health bar. We're going to do x minus, our guy is 64 by 64, so we're going to do x minus 32. We're going to do y. We want him to be above us, the health bar to be above the guy. So if we want to have like I say a 6 pixel health bar, 32 plus 6 is 38. So we're going to do y it's going to be up. We're going to go minus 38. And then for our other x value, we want to do x plus 32. And then for our y value, we want to do y minus 32. So what this will do is this will draw the health bar like up above the guy, should be about 6 pixels high. And the amount that we're going to do, we need to calculate the amount. Calculate the health amount. And again, this is just a simple percentage calculation. You can Google that if you want, or you can just follow along here. So I'm going to do PC life. I'm going to do a var here. Var PC life equals life divided by life max times 100. And we might need to put this in parentheses here so that it executes that first. Because I think with PEMDAS, multiplication would go first, which would throw it off. So if you add these parentheses here, it'll do this calculation first and then times it by 100. So now we can go back here. We can specify PC life as our amount. Back color, we can just do C black. Cool. Min color, we're going to do C red. And then for max color, we're going to do C lime. Direction, we're going to leave it 0. Show back is going to be true. Show border is going to be false. We don't need a border. There we go. So that should work to draw our health bar. Cool. We have health bars. Look at that. And you see that the damage doesn't tick until after the explosion goes off, which could be a bad thing, because like if you launch an explosion and they're moving at you, if they're out of the explosion by the time that triggers, that could be a problem. But it's good enough for now. Let's run it again just for fun. I want them to chase me. Come on, chase me. Boom. Look at that. Mad damage. Mad damage. And if I want to do this, I can copy this code here. And I can actually add that to I can add a step event on my wizard here. Draw. And I can just add that here. And now my wizard will have a health bar. Okay, cool. So they're running towards me, but they're not yet attacking me. So the very last thing I want to do is I want to make them attack me. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a sprite. I'm going to do a similar thing that I did with like the fireball splody, except I'm not going to do all the complicated list stuff. When they attack me, because I don't want to animate it yet, I'm just going to add them like a little slash. And so I'm going to draw like a little slash effect. And when that pops up, that's going to do damage to me. So we're going to create a new sprite. And we're going to name this one SPR slash. And we're going to edit this image. And what this is going to be, so we're going to be slashing with the right hand. So it's going to be something like this. So I'm going to draw this. And then I'm going to get rid of like this here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to basically make this like a little slash effect here. Just a really quick and dirty slash. There we go. Whoosh. Perfect. Now we've got that. Let's make sure we center it. We're going to do middle center. Cool. So we have our slash. Again, we're going to create an object. OBJ slash. Do our sprite and SPR slash. And so cool. We're going to add an event when we collide with object player. We're going to do damage. So let's see. Since we have our damage specified on our dude, because we're not going to have to hit multiple guys, I'm going to do a create event as well. And damage will be set by the calling instance. Damage equals 0. Boom. So when it collides with the player, again, we're going to check if the instance still exists. If instance exists, other, because we're doing a collision event. And we're specifically colliding with object players, so we're going to reference this instance of object player. See, player exists, deal the damage. So we're going to do other.life minus equals damage. There we go. So we have our slash, and we also need to, since there's no animation, we need to also add a expire on this one as well. Expire equals 0. And say we want this to apply only once. So what we can do is that, because what's going to happen is, let's do hit equals false. I'm going to make a variable called hit. Now what this is going to do is we can do if hit equals false. I do double equal signs here because I'm comparing. I'm not assigning a value, I'm comparing. Because if I was doing hit equals false, then that wouldn't, it would throw a bug, because I would be assigning hit to false. I'm just comparing if hit equals false. So this is a comparison operator, is like the equals equals. If hit equals false, then what we can do is we can do our other life, we can do our damage, and then we can set hit to true. That will prevent this from triggering all the time. And what we can do now is that we can add expire plus equals 1 if expire is greater, we'll say 5. We want to show up just briefly, right? We want to be super quick, but still quick enough, or still take long enough that we can see it. Instance destroy. The slash doesn't just live forever. Okay. Player exists. Ensure we don't keep spamming damage. Deal the damage and set my hit flag to false, or to true, to prevent damage spam. Because if this wasn't here, this would basically do like 5 times the damage that I would mean it to do, because it's going to live for like 5 counts. So like, can't do math, man. It would live for like 5/60ths of a second, right? So we've got that. Boom. So cool. So now on our orc, in the step event, we want to do our attack range. So what we can do here is that if attack timer is greater or equal to, actually no, is greater or is less than or equal to 0. This is how I'm going to do this. To 0. Yes, that's how I'm going to do it. Greater or equal to 0. Then what we can do is we're going to deal the damage. Create a slash. So we're going to do instance create. Actually, we're gonna make this a variable. Slash equals instance create depth Rx, Ry, our own X, our own Y. We're going to do depth is going to be R's -5. We want it to be up above like everything else so you can see it. And it's going to be object slash image angle equals our own image angle. Because we want the slash to face where we're actually swinging from. And I think that should be all we need. We also need to calculate the damage. So we have the damage here. So we need to do slash dot damage, because on our slash object we declared damage in the create event. So we declared that variable. So what we can do here is do the same thing. I random range damage min and damage max. There we go. Cool. So now this should work. Oh, we also need to do one last thing. Reset our timer to avoid attack spam. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do attack timer equals attack timer max. And then what we have to do now is we also have to add code to if attack timer is greater than 0, we want it to decrement that. So attack timer minus equals 1. So what this allows us to do is that attack timer always sets at 0, which means that we can instantly attack. Once we do a slash, it sets that to max, and then if it's over that, it'll start counting down until we can actually attack again. Now, it won't show any cooldown thing, like I don't have that displayed, but it will prevent them from spamming me with attacks. So let's just test this here. Okay, this is not working out that well. I mean, I'm gonna die. Holy cow, man. So they are doing damage, but the slashes aren't dying, which is a problem. So let's go here. Oh, I didn't. I'm doing this in the collision event. This is dumb. See, I should not have done that. I'm going to add event, step, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this here. There we go. Now it should work how we intend it. Boom, look at this. Slashes are going everywhere. Oh my god, I'm dying. I'm dying. Oh no. Boom. Yeah. So the slashes kind of like stay like where they're created, and that kind of looks bad. I kind of want it to follow them. So what I can do is I can create a variable called creator equals no one. And what I can do is when OrcBro creates it, I can do slash dot creator equals my ID, which is just built in. And then what I can do now is with slash in the step event, I can do x, let's see, determine if instance exists. As always, we're referencing another object. If instance exists, we're going to do creator. Then Rx will equal creator X, and Ry will equal creator Y. And also our image angle, we will update that to also equal creator image angle. Boom, look at that. Determine if instance exists. Update our position and rotation to match the Orc Bro who caused us to, yeah, match the Orc Bro who swung at the player. Cool. So now we did that. Okay, so now this should, there you go. That looks much better. Their slashes are like going with them. And I've died, my health bar is gone, but I haven't programmed anything that happens when I die. But there we go. Anyway, we've been going for a long time. I'm at the 2-hour mark. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call it here. I'm going to push this video out, and then what I might do is I might just sort of refine this example and cut it up into smaller bits maybe. I might just make a series on it, but I've just been so tired from work lately that it's been so, like, I program all day, and then when I come home, the last thing I want to do is program usually. So it's been I haven't really fired up Game Maker in a few months. So this is like a good exercise for me as much as for everybody else, but there's definitely some good information in here. Probably didn't explain it in the best way, but if this even helps one person, then mission accomplished. So thank you all so much for watching, and let me know in the comments if you want me to make more games or more content like this, because I would enjoy doing this, sharing some knowledge I know. Again, this may not be the way to do something, but it's a way. But you can see my logic process of how I'm working through stuff, and you know, commenting in my code what I'm thinking as I'm going is a very important part. And yeah, if you want to see more stuff like this, you can give me ideas for games to make and things like that, and I can see what I can come up with.